Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Motes. On today's episode, Boba Fett and Bossk team up to hunt for an Imperial traitor, a former stormtrooper on the run, with a list of undercover agents. But this bounty isn't exactly what it appears. Will Boba Fett and Bossk capture the merchandise? Will they fall into the trap laid by one of the galaxy's biggest crime bosses? Or will they turn on each other? All these questions and more coming up in today's book, The Bounty Hunter Wars, Slave Ship by K.W. Jeter. And joining me to talk about the book, once again, it's Jay. Jay,
Hi,
how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Aaron?
I am very good. How's your last week been?
I've been very busy, prepping for Mother's Day and work and trying to squeeze the book in times when I have it.
It almost feels like a job trying to read these between each episode, isn't it?
Sometimes, yeah. I don't feel like it felt this way for the New Jedi Order, but for some reason these books seem a bit more laborious.
Well, you said you really enjoyed the first book in the series, The Mandalorian Armor. What is your brief overall opinion of this story?
I like it. I still love hearing about other aspects of the Star Wars universe than, our Sith and Jedi and you know, outside of the rebellion and the empire. Like, it really makes things a lot more fleshed out in the universe.
Awesome. I can't wait to talk about the book with you again today. But before we get to that, let's take some listener questions. We have 2 emails today. The first question comes from Zachary, who wrote a very nice email, but I had to trim it down a bit for the podcast. Jay, will you please read Zachary's email?
Absolutely. Hello. I have some questions about Death Troopers and Red Harvest. First, in Death Troopers, the plague is spread through the air almost immediately, but in Red Harvest, it seems to be spread through bites and exchanges of fluids. Second, regarding the screaming from the zombies in Red Harvest, it felt like they were communicating, but in Death Troopers, it felt like they were screaming without reason. These 2 books really stumped my coworker and me. I feel like Death Troopers could be recanonized, but I think Red Harvest would be left behind and retconned. Thank you for your time and have a good day.
Thank you very much for the email, Zachary. So, Red Harvest takes place back in the Old Republic time, and Death Troopers takes place just before the events of A New Hope. So, we have anywhere between 3,000 and 4,000 years in between when those stories take place. I would say that the virus just evolved. It started out as one that was exchanged through bodily fluids, and by the time of Death Troopers, it had become airborne. That's the way I rectify the situation. As for the zombies, I don't know. Maybe they were communicating back in Red Harvest because they were all Sith acolytes. They were all Force users. And the ones in Death Troopers, for the most part, were just prisoners and stormtroopers on a prison vessel. So I can't really help you with that one, but that's the way I see it. I think it's just an evolution of the virus over time. Jay, do you have any opinions?
Don't actually, because those are 2 Star Wars novels that I haven't read. I remember when Death Troopers came out and reading the back of it, and I cringed having a zombie story in Star Wars. So I kind of avoided it. And even when we got those kind of zombie episodes in the Clone Wars, I still kind of cringed at that. So I like zombies. I like Star Wars. Not a big fan of them being combined.
That's cool. People like different things. I will say that I think Red Harvest and Death Troopers are fun reads, particularly at Halloween time. You know, they're a nice, scary story, which is sometimes something different than what you get in Star Wars. I won't say they're my favorite books. I think I liked Red Harvest a little more than I did Death Troopers, but regardless, I think they're both fun fun little scary stories if you like scary stories. Zachary, to answer your second question as toward canonization or not, sure, I guess Death Troopers could be recanonized. But like I said, I think they're just fun standalone stories. I don't think they really need to stand in canon or outside of canon. I think they just are what they are. Now, today's second email comes from Jacob, who says, "Hello there. I have a question about the apparent death of Mace Windu. A lot of the proponents of the theory that Mace could still be alive, including Samuel L. Jackson, tend to cite the fact that Jedi can fall from great heights, and if you don't see the body, the character's death isn't set in stone. However, what these theories seem to ignore is the fact that Mace was flung out of the window after getting a face full of unlimited power from possibly the most powerful Sith Lord in history. In my opinion, we do see a dead body, and that it's only a lifeless husk of crude matter that goes flying out of the window. I find it interesting that even people who are against the theory that Windu could be alive don't usually bring up that detail. What are your thoughts?" Thank you for the email, Jacob. Jay, I'll let you answer this one first. What do you think of Jacob's question?
I've actually always been a proponent that Mace Windu did survive that and just went into hiding.
Why?
And
Why is that?
there was just something about it that it didn't feel finished. And because right after that, you see, you know, Obi-Wan Kenobi saying any Jedi that are alive, like, go into hiding. And there was just a lot in those few moments where it just seemed like he maybe reconsidering. He was injured and decided to just kind of lick his wounds because, he did have his hand cut off. He was electrocuted. We also know that Mace Windu has touched the dark side and come back. That's why he has the purple lightsaber. So I don't know. Maybe he saw a shatter point and did something. I don't know. For me, that was always something that I wanted more of. And I love that it's been getting traction lately, especially from the actor. But that was one of those things that I always was like, I feel like there was a cut scene here where you see him kind of skulking away.
Well, for me, I have always considered that Mace was killed after being flung out the window. I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. If he does come back, it would depend on the way they use him coming back as to whether or not it would work for me or not. But I have always agreed with your opinion, Jacob. To me, Mace Windu died after being flung out the window. I don't necessarily believe that he was killed by the lightning and it was just his body flung out the window. I think he was probably alive until he landed. But the reason that's kind of the way I viewed it is I think that is important for Anakin. I think that's important for his downfall. I think that's the last straw for him fully falling to the dark side and becoming Darth Vader. Thanks again for the emails, Zachary and Jacob. Now, listener, if you have a question for the show, you can email me at swlegendslounge@gmail.com, or something new, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, all at SW Legends Lounge. In previous episodes, you may remember that I had a different Twitter handle. However, something happened on Twitter. I no longer have access to that Twitter handle, so I had to change it. So, if you go looking for me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky, all of them are at SW Legends Lounge. Jay, now it's time for today's book. The Bounty Hunter Wars Slave Ship by K.W. Jeter. Once again, to keep the summary from getting too confusing and to honor the author's vision, Jay and I are going to split the story. I'll take the past. Jay will once again handle the present day plot. I thought that worked pretty well last episode, didn't you, Jay?
Yeah, I actually loved that, how we broke that up last time. It was great.
I listened to it, obviously, when I was editing, and then, of course, I listened to it again after it posted, and I think everything made perfect sense. Just listening to the two voices, and you kind of knew when we were speaking, what timeline we were speaking in.
Yeah, I think it was a great idea.
Cool. I always like the validation of others.
That's why you have a podcast, right?
Exactly. Listener, grab yourself a drink. Let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge.
The story begins in orbit above Tatooine. Bosk relishes in his victory, the death of Boba Fett. As he watches the destruction of Slave One start to dissipate, Bosk hears a ping. He looks at his ship's computer and freezes. Slave One. Impossible. Then he hears a voice. Boba Fett. He's alive, and he tells Bosk that there's a bomb on the Houndstooth. Terrified, Bosk races to his escape pod and ejects. As the pod falls into Tatooine's atmosphere, Bosk sees Slave One approach his ship. It was a trick. Boba Fett wasn't going to destroy Houndstooth. He's stealing it.
After Bosk killed his father Kradusk, the Bounty Hunters Guild split in two. The Guild Reform Committee, led by Bosk, and the True Guild, composed mainly of the older bounty hunters who supported Kradusk. It's exactly what Prince Shizor wanted. With the guild gone, Shizor can get rid of the weaker bounty hunters, leaving only the strong ones for the Empire to use to hunt down the leaders of the rebellion. And to begin, Shizor puts out an enormous bounty for an Imperial traitor, a former stormtrooper named Vasant, who murdered his squad and stole a list of undercover agents. The size of the bounty ensures every bounty hunter in the galaxy will be looking for the trooper. And of course, that means Boba Fett.
Dengar, Neela, and Boba Fett leave Slave One in orbit around Tatooine and transfer onto the Houndstooth. But Dengar and Neela are confused. Why did Boba Fett allow Bosk to live? And why are they taking his ship? Boba Fett says not to worry about Bosk. He'll deal with the Trandoshan when the time comes. And he says the Houndstooth will allow them to hide. Boba Fett says he wants the people who tried to bomb them on Tatooine to think he's dead. It's time to hunt them down and see how they like it when the Mandalorian returns from the grave.
With all the bounty hunters in the galaxy searching for Vasant, Boba Fett approaches Bosk with a proposition. They should team up, find the stormtrooper, and have Bosk convince him to sell them the list of undercover Imperial agents. When Bosk asks why the trooper would agree to that, Fett says that as the leader of the Guild Reform Committee, Bosk can offer Vasant protection from the other bounty hunters. And to convince the stormtrooper, Fett says Bosk will offer Vasant proof that the Transocean can protect him. How? Bosk asks. By showing him this, Boba Fett answers. The Mandalorian opens his cargo hold, and there lies a dead body. It's Bosk's former partner, Zuckuss.
On the planet Kuat, there's also a rebellion brewing. Several of the ruling families are displeased with the decision that Kuat of Kuat has been making. The 10 families call Kuat to a meeting where they propose removing the inheritance exception that has allowed House Kuat to maintain control of the Kuat drive yards for generations. The 10 are led by Kos, House Kinlan, the chief rival family of House Kuat. Kos accuses Kuat of treason. saying the technician has sold out to Prince Caesar and Black Sun. But not everyone is convinced. House Coolvault still supports Kuat of Kuat. Its leader, a woman named Kodar, says the only thing Kos wants is power. Kuat agrees, and the technician sets out to prove Kos's treachery.
Boba Fett and Bosk track Vasant to a planet in the Outer Rim. Bosk approaches Vasant in a cantina and offers the former stormtrooper his services to protect him from the other bounty hunters looking for him. Vasant doesn't believe Bosk, and the conversation quickly turns south. Suddenly, Boba Fett enters the cantina, blasters drawn. The Mandalorian stuns Vasant, Bosk scoops him up, and the two bounty hunters make their escape.
As Kos lays out his evidence against Kuat, the technician notices something. Kos won't let the House Kenlan elder speak. Playing a hunch, Kuat and Kodar approach the elder. When Kos steps in front of them, Kodar comes to Kuat's defense. She trips Kos and holds him down while Kuat reaches into the elder's life support pod. The pod opens, showing the representatives of the other family Kos's treachery. The elder is dead. It's clear that he's been dead for a long time. But Kos rigged the pod to make it look like the elder was still alive. Confronted with what Kos has done, his supporters withdraw their complaints against Kuat.
Boba Fett and Bosk dump the unconscious stormtrooper in one of the holding pens on Slave One, and immediately Bosk pulls his blaster on Fett. The Trandoshan wants the bounty all for himself. But Boba Fett has a surprise of his own, and that surprise places the muzzle of his blaster right in the middle of Bosk's back. It's Zuckuss. He's alive. It turns out Gans can put themselves into a state of suspended animation. And Zuckuss has agreed to team up with Boba Fett against Bosk. However, Boba Fett doesn't really want a partner. After disarming Bosk, Fett turns his blaster on Zuckuss and forces both of them into an escape pod. He launches the two bounty hunters into space and then travels to the web of Kudar Mubat to collect the bounty.
Story ends with Kuat of Kuat heading to Coruscant to meet the Imperial leadership. Kuat agrees to allow Kodar to go along with him, his new security chief. During the trip, Kodar tells Kuat that she knows about his obsession with Boba Fett and the bombing of Tatooine. Kuat assumes that Kodar and her family are going to try and blackmail him. But Kodar says she doesn't care about the Mandalorian. She's more interested in one of the dancing girls that was at Jabba the Hutt's palace. Why? Kuat asks. Kodar says she's looking for her lost sister, Katil, and Kodar thinks she was a slave at Jabba's. But Kuat says there were no dancing girls at Jabba's palace named Katil. Of course not, Kodar says. When her sister was young, she couldn't pronounce her name. Instead, she called herself Neela.
Time to take a break. When we return, Jay and I will talk more about the Bounty Hunter Wars, Slave Ship. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But let me recommend a book from Star Wars canon. Jedi Battle Scars tells the story of Cal Kestis and the crew of the Stinger Mantis following the events of Jedi Fallen Order. The crew meets a former stormtrooper who has information that could prove crucial for the rebellion. But can the Imperial deserter be trusted? And can Cal evade pursuit from the evil fifth brother? Find out in Jedi Battle Scars by Sam Maggs. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today, Jay and I are talking about the second book in the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy, Slave Ship by K.W. Jeter. Okay, Jay, first off, what are your overall impressions of the second book in this series?
think we really get an insight into Boba Fett as a character, and I feel like this really is sort of one of his legacies of how badass a character he is, where he's very calculating, he's thought his plans out more so than his opponents, and he's just on a different level. And I think this book really highlights just how different a bounty hunter he is than the rest of the guild.
One of the few criticisms that I have of this book is it seems like most of the action takes place in the past plot line. The present day plot line is Boba Fett, Dengar, and Neela on Houndstooth, and Neela asking Dengar to tell her the story of Boba Fett breaking up the guild and the events that took place afterward. The only other thing that happens in present day is on Kuat. I like this book more than the first one, but I do wish Boba Fett, Dengar, and Neela did a little more in this book than what they did.
Yeah, I had the same kind of thought with that. For something called Slave Ship, they're not even on it, and then they're kind of background characters for some reason. But I don't know. I guess maybe we get more of them in the next one.
Sure. This is only the second time I'm reading this series. When I read them, it was back when they first came out. That was the late 90s. They came out in, I believe, 97, 98, and 99. So it's been quite a while since I have read them. So Prince Shizor has gotten what he wanted with the breakup of the Bounty Hunters Guild. He's hoping to take the weaker bounty hunters that were protected by the guild and take them off the board so that only the strong hunters remain. Who do you think he is going after with these bounty hunters? Because I do have an idea, and I think it ties in with Shadows of the Empire.
Well, when you put it like that, then I think he's looking for Luke.
So, on some level, I thought that. But the things in the past actually take place prior to Shadows of the Empire, and he doesn't learn. Well, I shouldn't say that. In Shadows of the Empire, he learns that Skywalker is important to Vader in a flashback of something that happens during Empire Strikes Back. So, you are correct. I think he's wanting to use these bounty hunters to chase down Luke Skywalker, not knowing the importance of Skywalker to Vader, just knowing that Vader wants Skywalker alive.
Yeah, I think he wants him for bait. I don't necessarily think he wants him for what Luke represents or the fact that he's considered a leader of the rebellion. I think he wants Luke Skywalker as bait for Vader. And he has a trap set for Vader so that he can slide into that position of power right under the Emperor and have his own little empire under the Emperor's nose.
Yeah, Vader and Shizor act like bickering siblings who want their parents' attention. Vader being the older sibling who normally has most of the attention, but Shizor on some level acts like the younger sibling who wants to get the older brother out of the way.
Yeah, I could see that. They also approach things very differently, right? Where Vader is very hands-on, very, physically intimidating, and Caesar is almost playing a chess game, um, and using more of his intellect. And I honestly, I think the Emperor kind of is enjoying the differencing of how they approach things and just loving the drama between the two of them.
Yeah, but to be honest, I do think the Emperor doesn't really care about Shizor. I think when it comes down to a decision between Vader and Shizor, the Emperor wouldn't care if Vader just eliminated the Falleen.
I don't think the Emperor really cares about Vader either, because he kind of made a comment about, you can grow old and, until I have no more use for you, and then you kind of disappear. So if he feels that Vader doesn't have any use for him anymore, that Shizor does, then that's just natural Sith progression, right? It's the strong survives.
In the past timeline, we see Boba Fett team up with Bosk. In the present day timeline, Boba Fett has teamed up with Dengar. Yet, continually throughout the book, they talk about how Boba Fett does not like to team up with anyone. Why do you think the author keeps putting these partnerships together?
One, I think it's, we're getting that brief scene of the bounty hunters in Empire where they're all lined up. And really the only one we ever see after that is Boba Fett. So I think this is his kind of way of, hey, these are why these characters were relevant. I'm giving them a bit more of a background, a history with each other. Um, but I also think it might be very boring just to hear Boba Fett in his head the entire time talking about his plans to himself.
Yeah, he doesn't really speak in complex sentences. You don't really, he is very short when speaking. I would assume his thoughts are just as short.
Exactly. So that would make for a very boring, boring book.
Yeah. How about Bosk? He is not being painted in the best light in this book. Yes, we grew up hearing about the Trandoshan temper, and Bosk does fly off the handle in both of these books at certain points. He lets his anger take control of him, but he doesn't seem to be very smart at anything he does.
No, I actually kind of like that. Um, that they've made him that way because especially with the first book too, where he's like has this very heightened sense of importance of himself, and that's great for him. But I think people seeing on the outside just see that anger, and he's like a dull blade where it has its use, but at the end of the day, it's not gonna create a new regime or you know
You can imagine the other bounty hunters just sitting there listening to him talk, and when he's done, he's got this, like you said, big self-esteem. He's got this big ego, and he's walking around with his head up. When he passes them, the others are looking at him like, hey, this guy's an idiot, right? But right, he is an idiot.
but they also don't want him to hear that because they know that's when you get that Trandoshan temper and
Sure.
he'll like obliterate them
Yeah, they
and
do
eat
know
them.
that he is strong enough, powerful enough to kill them and eat them. But yeah, these two books do not paint Bosk in the best light.
No, no. But I think it's hilarious, especially when you see how calculating Boba Fett is. And, you know, for someone who Bosk is so sure of himself, and then he's put up against Boba Fett, who is exceptionally sure of himself, and it's a wide gap as to what that actually means.
The double cross followed by a triple cross, followed by maybe a quadruple cross between Bosk, Boba Fett, Zuckuss, and then Boba Fett again. I won't say it's difficult to follow because it's not. I mean, I followed it, but I was sitting there thinking, is Boba Fett playing like 3D Dejarik while Bosk is playing like Tiddlywinks or something? And one of the sweetest things in these books is just how naive Zuckuss is, but yet he's still surviving in this bounty hunter war that's going on.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that also shows a little bit of intelligence from Zuckuss's part because he knows which player to back. But I think he's a little too trusting
A little.
and and thinking he's not going to get. And I would think by this point he would have had that knowledge to, you know, not second guess, especially someone like Boba Fett. But hey, he's still there, and um, I'm actually kind of surprised that there wasn't a fight that broke out with the two, him and Bosk in that escape pod.
I just don't think there was enough room. I don't think they could move. The way it was described, it almost sounded like Zuckuss's elbow was up near Bosk's face and Bosk's knee was near Zuckuss's like methane tubes that were going to his mask. So I'm
Yeah,
not really sure they could move around in there.
well, it's true. But yeah, that was like I when I heard that, I was actually like I actually giggled,
Yeah.
right? Like I was like, this is hilarious.
Let's get to the two most interesting parts of this book for me. First, when Boba Fett and Prince Shizor go to talk to the assembler, Kudar Mubat, the spider-like creature keeps thinking that one of its little nodes, balance sheet, is getting too big for its britches and that it'll have to consume balance sheet and create another little accountant. However, we learn as Shizor is getting ready to leave that balance sheet is no longer completely tethered to Kudar Mubat. Balance sheet is completely independent. And now it wants to enter into an alliance with Shizor. Balance sheet's going to kill Kudar Mubat. Am I right? He's got to.
Yeah, I would think he's kind of got has to at this point, and he's looking for that big backer to help him do it.
I imagine Kudar Mubat like the size of that giant spider in the Lord of the Rings movies. And I imagine balance sheet to basically be the size of a hardback book. You know, he's not that big. But the little node is already plotting a revolution. He's making little teeny tiny nodes of himself also that are moving around.
Yeah.
What do you think he offers Shizor?
I think he gets information. I think he's got, balance sheet has access to all the knowledge that uh, Kadar Marbat has and can siphon that off, and Shizor can use it against him. So I think it's all about information and power.
That's good. I didn't think of it that way. I was thinking that because balance sheet isn't completely tethered to the assembler anymore, that the information would stop flowing at all. Really, all we know is that information is not flowing from balance sheet to Kudar Mubat. We don't know.
Exactly.
Information could still be flowing from Kudar to balance sheet.
Well, and all he would have to do is make another node that maybe siphons off the information that he's looking for. And if he ever got questioned on it, he could be like, "Oh, I'm doing some accounting, something not adding up." And Kudar Marglat would probably just be like, "Oh, okay." because he's already kind of done that where kind of as much as he says I need to reabsorb that one and start new, he still kind of just lets him go, oh, you have that's a unique thought, huh? Okay, well, I'll do it later because you're still kind of useful to me. So I think on the flip side of that, I think balance sheet can manipulate what Kudor Marbat is experiencing and what information he's getting. So I think for Shizor, that's what he wants. He wants access to the records. He wants, you know, he's the go between. Kudar Marbat's the go between the bounty hunters and the other the marks, right? Like whoever's putting up the bounty. He's now going to have that access to all that information, and as the head of a criminal organization, like that seems like it would be invaluable.
Sure. And then I can imagine once Shizor gets whatever information he wants after helping Balance Sheet kill Kudar Mubat, Shizor could just step on Balance Sheet and squash the little thing. And,
Yeah,
then he's in control of all the information now.
yeah. So that's how I see it. Is that's what he gets out of it. Um, that's just my thoughts.
And then for me, the most interesting question to come out of this book is Neela. I'm not going to say that the plot line that happens on Kuat is the most interesting thing to me, because some of that, while I do like politics, some of that stuff just didn't resonate for me. But in the first book, The Mandalorian Armor, we get where Dengar thinks that Neela isn't a normal dancing girl, that she has an aristocratic air to her. And at the end of this book, we learn that one of the houses of Kuat has a lost daughter, that Kodier's sister, Kayleen, or Colleen, however you pronounce it, is missing. And that her pet name as a little girl was Neela. How do you think this is going to affect the last book in this story?
I mean, that was something that was a big drop right at the end there. I honestly wasn't expecting that. Um, so it kind of took me off and what that means going forward. I mean, she's got to have some importance where, she was hidden away for whatever reason. She was, you know, had her memories wiped. Does she have some kind of information against Kuat that would lead her family to take over? Does she have information on Boba Fett or maybe the recording that's on Slave One from Tatooine and trying to implicate Shizor? Like, I don't know.
I think that last one would be less likely for her to understand. I do like your thought that maybe that House Kuat did this to her. And if Kodier can find her sister and overcome the mind wipe, then that will expose House Kuat and allow House Coolvolt, if that's how you pronounce it, to take over the Kuat drive yards. And then they control the economy there on the planet Kuat. I think that, at least That's what I'm imagining this plot line moving forward to.
But wouldn't Kuat know that that house was missing a daughter if he was responsible for it?
I'm not saying he was responsible. I'm saying House Kuat. I'm saying
Okay.
that maybe she's been missing for a long time, and it was his mother or father, whoever was in charge of House Kuat before he got there, that did this.
Okay. That makes I like that trail a lot more. But yeah, I'm not sure how because obviously there's going to be something in the past and this present timeline that sort of combine and
You're right. There would have to be a reason for House Kuat to do that, and that would, I guess, I would be inferring that Neela did somehow stumble on some piece of information that would be harmful to House Kuat.
Mhm.
There has to be some reason why Neela had her mind wiped. What that
Yeah.
reason is, I don't know. The only other thing I could think of is maybe Neela was supposed to be the heir to House Kuvolt, and maybe Kodir is a younger sister. We don't know the ages. And Kodir had her mind wiped and had her exiled. Now,
Hmm.
why she would do that, not just kill her, I don't know. But that's the only other thing that I could think of.
Well, I guess we're just gonna have to dive into book three and find out.
Yeah, Hard Merchandise. That's the name of book 3. Well, Jay, it's just about time to go. And as you said, we have one book left in the Bounty Hunter Wars. Are you looking forward to it?
I am actually. Like I said, that drop right at the end of this one with Neela, I really want to see where that goes. Um, and I'm hoping to see some more badassery from Boba Fett.
I'm hoping to get more action in the present day storyline. And I think we're going to have to. You know, we have Boba Fett, Dengar, and Neela all together. We have, like you said, the reveal that Neela used to be a member of one of the ruling houses of Kuat. I just want a little more of the actual plot to move forward in the present day timeline.
Yeah, I think it needs to. I hoping that the next book is maybe more in the present than in the past.
Yeah, maybe there won't be as much jumping back and forth. Well, Jay, if listeners would like to get in touch with you, or if they would like to listen to your podcast, Animated Antics, with friend of the show and former co-host Kat, how can they do that?
Well, you can find us on Twitter at JanCat1. You can email us at animatedantics0. That's the number, not the word, at gmail.com. You can find us on Blue Sky and Instagram at Animated Antics Podcast. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, where haven't recently been arguing about the Jays and the Orioles because the Jays have been kind of in the toilet. It's J81Hunt at Twitter.
Let's go O's. Jay, what's the next show that you and Kat will be covering?
We're going to be doing Invincible Season 2.
Never seen it.
It's a different, Invincible is a different take on the superhero genre. So, yeah, we're going to be doing Season 2, and who knows after that.
Well, Jay, it's about time to wrap up. Listener, if you would like to contact this show, you can email me at swlegendslounge@gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. Ask me a question, send me your favorite Star Wars character groups, or if I've said something on this podcast that you disagree with, let me know. I love reading the things you listeners come up with. Jay, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I love joining you for these books. It's so much fun.
And by the time we do the next episode, we will have one series between the O's and J's to finally talk about.
Oh, I'm not looking forward to that unless the Jays start playing better.
Listener, you can hear that episode as Jay and I wrap up book number 3 in the Bounty Hunters trilogy, Hard Merchandise, coming out on May 31st. Thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in legends.